Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a meeting of the city's Capital Improvements Committee. Today is April 1st, 2025. Today, we're following up on the meeting of last week where we went over some preliminary recommendations from our Citizens Advisory Committee and refreshed our memories of what our Complete Streets Committee had recommended to the Capital Committee, and then revisited what the resources we had regarding the proposed capital budget. After that, as a result of that meeting, we left it where we were going to say, hey, there were two components of the budget itself where we had more discretionary funds that we needed to allocate. Those being the 1/2 operating surplus from last year, which was just over $21 million. And then we also had about $5.3 million in gas tax revenues. And we left it with Rich Bradley to sort of come back, taking a look at what we had and try to come up with a scenario which allocates those funds, keeping in mind what the priorities were established from the Citizens Advisory Committee, trying to accommodate the Complete Streets recommendations, as well as what we know to be needed in the critical needs from our critical needs list. It's always like getting a square peg in a round hole, but that's what we've got before us. So I tell you what, let me pull this up. I can pull up the exhibit that I shared with you last week, circulated, and then we could see. Here we go. So you should have before you what those recommendations that Rich put together consist of. What I would like to do is just give it over, Rich, if you could brief the committee on what all these items are, and then we could just take it from there and discuss them among ourselves.
Thanks, Paul. So these are a culmination of the critical items that we had originally covered out of the list. I can walk through them and just give you a general idea of what they are, and then certainly answer any questions that you have. So if we start off, the first one is arterial street paving. On the capital needs inventory, there was a place marker on there for $10 million. This basically is a portion of it, and this would go to the street department or to BPS, depending on how it was allocated to do arterial street paving and continue work. There have been a lot of discussions about a lot of additional arterial streets that need to be paved above and beyond the ARPA funding that was allocated for the 30-mile street and $46 million in traffic calming. So this is an annual appropriation to continue to fund street paving. The next item under streets is underground downtown lighting vaults. This item started off as a $2 million item. I think I had mentioned previously that through a couple funding sources, we had funded about $1 million of it already. This is an additional $250,000. Basically what this is the street lights have electrical infrastructure that are in 11 underground vaults in St. Louis in the city downtown, and they are failing, they are flooding, all kind of issues with them. They're precast concrete, so the existing vaults would need to be removed and the new vaults installed. And currently the BPS design staff is working with the traffic division from the street department on that project. So this would be an additional $250,000 towards that item. And then again, that would leave $750,000 for us to fund somewhere in the future, or whatever balance would remain to complete those 11 vaults. The next item is ADA transition plan. This is one of the Complete Streets recommendations. We had talked about it, and just to remind everybody, City Ordinance 71822, the Complete Streets Ordinance, allows the Complete Streets Advisory Committee to make recommendations to the city's capital committee on transportation and mobility related projects. or inclusion and prioritization. This is one of those. Their ask was $2.1 million, and we have allocated $2 million, which is historical, along with what we've typically done over the past years. Do you want me to go through the whole list, Paul, or do you want me to stop there and field questions about streets?
Well, you can go through the list and we'll deal with questions as they come up.
Okay, great. The Parks Department made an ask for the Sherman Park Maintenance Building to be renovated or reconstructed, whichever would become cheaper. I believe the renovations are cheaper than the reconstruction, but until we actually get into that, and this basically is an item to repair the roof, repair tuck pointing, replace overhead doors, man doors, restrooms, update restrooms to ADA accessibility, and generally make that building usable. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Kim Hagley, the Parks Commissioner, mentioned that currently that building is condemned and is not able to be used. The next item on the list for parks is pool repairs. Let me get to that real quick here. And so originally the pool renovation item was $7 million. We had previously funded $3 million of this through various funding sources, leaving a balance of about $4 million. This is another $500,000 to go towards that. And as I had mentioned, there are 7 pools in the city, and we have done some work on a number of them, and this just continues the program that we have been working on for that program. Pool fencing, this is one that we had previously funded $550,000 for, and there was a delta in the cost estimate of need about $600,000 more, and my understanding is this is to upgrade pool fencing at Marquette Park and Chambers Park. And that would put up some kind of a more sturdy decorative type fencing that is more appealing, but actually is more safe. The Chambers Park pool was vandalized about a year ago, and access was gained through that fence area. So that's what that would do, is take care of fencing at those items. Soulard Market renovations. This item originally started off being an $8.5 million item. Now, I do want to mention that even though it's an $8.5 million item, that would not be a full renovation of Soulard Market. I think years ago we talked about this, and a full renovation is somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 to $30 million. This was a place marker to do critically needed items, electrical, mechanical, boilers, roofing, tuck pointing, doors, things along those lines there. But started off at $8.5 million, and we had previously funded, it looks like, $4,948,000, leaving a delta of about 3.5 million or so, a little more. This is an additional item for another $500,000 to continue parks work down there. And by the way, you know, Kim and her staff work with Rick Ernst, my Commissioner of Facilities Management, and his staff to do all the contracting and so forth for the majority of these projects, and Soulard Market is certainly one of those. The HVAC improvements at the recreation centers, obviously these are, you know, utilized by our citizens. That item started off at $6 million. We previously funded $1.3 million, leaving a delta balance of about $4.7 million. And this would add another $500,000 to the upgrade in those rec centers. And they've been doing a number of items. They've been doing refurbishing equipment there, the floors, painting, lighting, and various other items throughout those centers. And so again, this continues work on those 7 rec centers. The hazardous tree removal, I believe that speaks for itself, $550,000. This is an item we funded in the past, and this supplements the forestry staff in doing hazardous street tree removals that they do not have sufficient staff to do. And then under Parks Recreation Center, electrical upgrades, 3 recreation centers, 600,000. Those are Cherokee, Gamble, and Booter Rec Centers. And those electrical upgrades are for learning labs in those 3 rec centers. The next item on the list is fire department, ESD recommended St. Louis Fire Department vehicle funding is $820,000. And that is for the purchase of 2 new ambulances. We'll go through the courts next. There's an item on there for public safety, please. I don't know why that total carried itself. Oh, I see, it carried itself down just from fire. Okay. The courts, the first item, and the courts made a presentation to us, was courtroom modernization. That item originally started at $8.4 million. We have previously allocated $1 million to that, so the balance is $7.4 million. This one here is 1.232. It's a little bit of an odd number, but we had a little bit of extra money that was, spread across the board, and we just put it into this item to make up the balance. And basically, what that is for the courts are, as Mr. Domka and the judge spoke about in the Capital Advisory Committee, is updating courtrooms to current day standards and doing all the things that need to be done in there as far as facilities go, HVAC, sound systems, video equipment, and other things that are in a standard courtroom today. Next item on the list is civil courts facade repairs. And basically, this is the first part of a 3-part program to make repairs to the exterior stone panels and tuck pointing work on that building. And so $825,000 exterior masonry repairs. And we have already started that work over there. This is the next phase of that. And there are a couple more phases that are in the capital needs summary that need to be done. A building like that, the age of that building, 100 years old, basically, all these items need to be maintained due to water infiltration. All those panels are held onto the building with metal straps and other things like that that deteriorate over time with moisture. So this starts to begin the facade repairs on that building. The next item on the list is civil courts building revolving doors. And this is a repair replacement to those. Those buildings all have revolving doors because of the number of people that come in and out of them. It is a pressurization tool, keep HVAC and air pressure proper inside the building, as opposed to swinging doors opening and closing all the time. So that replaces those revolving doors on the civil courts building. Civil courts building lighting retrofit to LED. This is just basically in courtrooms and other areas of the civil courts building that have existing fluorescent lighting in there. We're upgrading to LED lighting, which is obviously energy efficient, but also provides better lighting and so forth for the use of those spaces. Carnahan Courthouse step repairs, I think that pretty well speaks for itself. That is an item on Carnahan. The stone stairs that lead to the building need to be reset, repaired. They're trip and fall hazards. They haven't had a significant amount of work in quite a while, and so that is a repair project there. The Carnahan Courthouse service elevator modernization was spoken about by the judge and Ms. Adamka as well, that in the Carnahan Courthouse, this is an elevator, if I'm not mistaken, that services and used to move jurors around to keep them separate of individuals who are being tried and so forth. And that elevator is experiencing a lot of issues and getting parts, and certainly beyond its its useful life. And so the conversation of how long they can keep it operative and what would happen if it failed and what a problem that would create mixing jurors and with individuals who are on trial. The next is Carnahan Courthouse drinking fountain replacement. Basically, the drinking fountains in that building are existing drinking fountains from when the building was constructed, old porcelain type drinking fountains. And what these are is a replacement of that with refrigerated drinking fountains with a water filler for bottles for jurors and people inside the building. And then Carnahan Courthouse new electrical panel and circuit replacement. Again, the building is extremely old. There's a lot of issues over there electrically. And what this would do is upgrade those electrical panels and circuits. And it complements the courtroom modernization project, which is first on the list, and allows those things in the courtroom to actually be connected. And then circuit courts uninterrupted power supply. The judge mentioned to the Citizen Advisory Committee that there is no backup in the facility if they lose power for any reason. All their records are electronically kept by law. And so an uninterrupted power supply, UPS, would provide a battery backup so that they could continue to operate in a power failure mode. Juvenile Detention Center elevator modernization. Again, as we talked about, the service elevator above, elevators have a useful life and they're very difficult to get parts for when they get beyond that useful life. And this particular elevator used at the Juvenile Detention Center is having issues, experiencing issues, and getting parts for it is extremely difficult. And so before it fails in its entirety, the courts asked if that elevator could be replaced. Step on down to ITSA network switch recapitalization. Let me get my notes here. This one's a little more difficult to explain. This is a multi-year project. Says poor user experience vulnerability of the network due to manufacturer no longer supporting devices, degraded network performance, and increased likelihood of a major outage. Cyber audits identify end-of-life equipment as being significant sources of network compromise. So this is a multi-year project. This is the first year ask of $130,000, and it's a 4-year project. And so years 2, 3, and 4 would be asks of $150,000 in order to get this project completed. The next is the Cisco core switch replacement. The core switch is the main network communication hub for all city government offices. Goes to end of service life on 10/31 of 2025. Replacing the core switch this fiscal year will allow us to stay current with securing switch technology and have equipment that has service and a maintenance included. This is a one-time ask of $300,000. And then the Hyper-V server replacement, all city network storage, website, and IT services rely on server nodes, quicker server response time, enhanced user experience, improved uptime, and Dell warranted maintenance on devices. If the production stack goes offline, all city IT services will go down, and that is bolded, highlighted, and underlined. Rendering the city IT useless until parts are found, maintenance techs are located, and the system may be repaired. The city maintains a 7-node Hyper-V stack. The oldest of these devices are nearing the end support, requiring third-party warranted service for parts and repair. This is a 4-year project, with the original year being a $75,000 ask, with 3 additional years of $75,000 as well. The next item on here is the circuit attorney restroom. We get to that. Circuit Attorney restroom. The Circuit Attorney's office employs more than 130 individuals and is visited daily by members of the public, including members of the judiciary, elected officials, and community leaders, crime victims, and witnesses. Currently, the fourth floor restroom in the Carnahan Courthouse requires significant work to ensure that they are functional, safe, and reflect the professional standards of this office. And so this is a one-time ask of $400,000 for that renovation. We turn the page. The next is the comptroller's telecom system replacement. And basically the write-up on that is we had previously allocated some funding for this. The project originally was $5.2 million. We had originally allocated that $5.2 million through capital and ARPA funding. And this particular ask, let me talk about the project a little bit. City Hall, Forestry, 1520 Market, Carnahan Courthouse, Juvenile Annex, Communications, Juvenile Center, Civil Courts, Gateway Transportation Center, Morgue, Municipal Garage, Board of Elections, and Billing Division on Broadway. By upgrading the Plexar to a hoisted voice services, the city will realize a savings of approximately $60,000 per month. Currently, we pay $90,000 per month. With HVS, the cost is $30,317.38. And the total cost for the project is shown to be $5,234,529 with an additional ask of about $800,000 to complete this project. And basically it says the cost of equipment and wiring each location has continued to rise. Since we did not have a signed contract, we're not able to lock in the 2021 prices, and that is the rationale behind the increase in funding. Then we drop down to other city vehicles. We have put 1.5 million in for refuse trucks, and we have put in 4.5 million for other city vehicles that are non-emergency. And Chris Amos should also be on the call here, and he can answer questions about that. We've discussed that, and actually the ask for other city vehicles was substantially more than this 4.5 million. If I flip to that page, other city vehicles, the original ask for that would have been $13 million. And then for refuse trucks, the ask originally was $3.8 million. So these are some portions of that original ask in conjunction with what funding is available. And we step down to maintenance, miscellaneous building repairs. This is a $500,000 ask from me. And what this does is when we have water pipes that break, roofs that leak, sewers that back up, or just any general miscellaneous building repairs in our over 100 buildings, people come and look for funding to get these repaired. We always ask the departments if they have any funding within their budget. That works for a little while, but generally over the past couple years, we have spent on an average of about $2 to $2.5 million in building repairs. This is a $500,000 ask as discretionary funding for those building repairs. And that would be generally either through facilities management or through the BPS construction division, depending on what the magnitude of the problem would be. Then we step down to the roads and bridge fuel tax funding, and that amount was $5,325,000 as shown on the exhibit that Exhibit A that Paul circulated. And so as I walk through these, all of these projects that I have highlighted on here are Complete Streets Committee recommendations. So, there are two types of projects that I'm gonna talk about. So the Cass Avenue improvements is a project that we are seeking additional funding on from the feds. If you'll notice that there was originally a $1.2 million ask that was on the capital needs inventory. We've reduced that to $500,000. Working with SLDC, they had some remaining funding from what I understand to be their NGA bond funding that they will put towards this project. So the capital committee ask would be $500,000, a complete streets committee ask. The next one, River to Pear Boulevard improvements. This is a complete streets ask as well. And we already do have a grant for this project. So the remaining funding that we need for this project at this moment, and I say at this moment, is $285,000. And that takes care of the, let's see, that takes care of a portion of the construction cost and the right-of-way funding that are needed. We already have design funding, but we would still have going forward in future years about next FY 27, we would be looking at needing about $3.2 million for construction. We don't need that at the moment. This funding would take care of all the items we need at the moment. Traffic management enhancements, phase 7 is a complete streets ask. We do have a grant for that. That is South Broadway from Marceau to Carroll. We have funded the design on that. And basically, this $1,860,000 is the right-of-way and construction cost. So that would be all we need left to finish that project. Next one, traffic management enhancements, phase 8. We do have a grant for that project already. That is North Broadway from Cass to Riverview. We have funded the design on that project, and this $1.240 million would be the remaining funding that we need in order to complete that project. The next project is Old Stable Bridge. We will be seeking a grant for that project, and this $120,000 is the cost of the design and right of way. Assuming we get a grant for this project, we would need in FY 27 an additional $380,000 in order to satisfy the funding to build that project. I'll ask you to skip over to miscellaneous bridge and roadway discretionary until the end, and then I will talk about that. Traffic management enhancements, phase 9. We are also seeking a grant for, that is Skinker McCausland from Canterbury to Etzel. And we are asking for $400,000. That would take care of the design and right-of-way funding for that project. And then we would not need construction funding until FY 28, which is about $2 million. And then traffic management enhancements, phase 9, again, another complete streets committee recommendation. All these are that I just talked about. The traffic management enhancements, phase Christie Boulevard, Greenway extension, Holly Hills to Kings Highway. That project for $120,000 is the design and right of way. And then in FY 27, we would be looking for, assuming we get the grant we're seeking, we would need $380,000 for the construction funding to build that project. So everything under roads and bridges, fuel tax again, complete streets recommendation. The only recommendation that I did not include as a complete streets recommendation was a locally funded project for bicycle facility improvements, improved pavement marking features on existing bike facilities, so forth, restriping, bike lanes, durable thermoplastic symbols, thermoplastic sharrows, and things like stock necessary items like zebras, delineators, and flexible posts, and may include enhanced crosswalks. That was a $1.2 million project, and I heard discussion in the last meeting that is really more of a maintenance type item that could possibly be included in the street department budget. And so I did not include that as one of the projects under roads and bridges for Complete Streets, but every other project Complete Streets Committee asked for is in this list. And then finally, the miscellaneous bridge and roadway discretionary is something that I again am asking for. Last year, we allocated every dollar of the roads and bridge funding fuel tax to projects. And so the problem with that is that when there is a failure on a bridge, a handrail, an expansion joint, there's a failure in a street, something needs to be repaired, and it is larger than a maintenance cost the street department have. I get asked these on a regular basis. And so just like the miscellaneous building repairs, I am respectfully asking for $800,000 in discretionary funding so that when a problem arises and it comes to our attention, we're not just clawing and scratching, looking for money for bridges and roadways. We can, execute an emergency contract, get a contractor out to perform these repairs in a quick manner for public safety. So I'll stop there for questions.
I see Nancy's hand is raised. Go ahead, Nancy.
Rich, I just wanted to make sure, I think it might be helpful to elaborate what's happening at Forest Park and Grand Avenue. Wouldn't that be something that we hadn't anticipated? And so you're using monies that you've cobbled together to get that done. But if we had this fund, you would have those funds more readily. And we did figure that all out, but I'm just saying that this would give us the opportunity to not have to figure out how to spend this.
That's
how
a
to
great
find the
example,
money.
Nancy. That's a great example. Thank you for reminding me of that. Not sure why that didn't come to the top of my mind, but so Forest Park and Grand Avenue, there's an underpass that goes under Grand Avenue off I-64. And within the past week, we've closed the exit ramp to I-64 to Forest Park Parkway and Grand Avenue because there is a section of stem retaining wall. We have a foundation failure, about a 20-foot section of wall, about 20 feet tall, 20 feet wide, has moved 9 inches in the last 30 days. And so if that wall were to fall over, obviously, and vehicles were there or on top of the ramp, it would be catastrophic. We worked with MoDOT. We've done all the closures. Now we need to do the repairs to that. And we have an emergency contractor out there who's going to mobilize and do those repairs. So yeah, that is a prime example of something I would use that funding for. Thank you so much for reminding me of that.
Christina, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich, for doing all of this work. I think, your strategy makes a lot of sense, which is get projects started versus fully funding them in full. I guess one suggestion I have for future capital committees is that maybe we get some more of that detail in our presentations, just the phasing, because I think it's a little hard to visualize or plan ahead. It's like, I think that you talked about it with it's a projects like, hey, they're going to ask for this amount this year, but really we'll need to commit to doing this like $75,000 a year payment for 3 or 4 years. So I think just having some of that, if we say yes to this proposal now, that means we're also kind of tying up future capital dollars, unless we're going to finance them some other way. But I think it's really because we're seeing the big ticket item. So when I was discussing these potential capital committee decisions with others in my office, I only have the big ticket item number to look at. This project is $5 million, when you're saying we could actually get it meaningfully started by doing the design phase, which is obviously much less. So just that it'd be great to have that level of detail a little earlier in the capital committee process. But I think it's a really, it's helpful to be able to have a lot more projects get started than setting aside $5 million for one roads project all at once. But in theory, we need to be mentally setting aside that amount of money for some years in the future. The only thing that I would say, I feel like we talked about this prior, but I think the comptroller's telecom systems replacement project still has money in their account. That if we could just cover that again, because that's one of the projects where I feel like we committed to funding it in full previously, and but the project's been delayed, and so the money's still sitting there. So I just want a refresher on that. And the thing that's missing from this list for me is medical examiner requests, and then there's nothing for CJC. And it just seems a little uneven to have so much going towards courts without something also going for the jail.
So I will just talk about a couple of these. So the telecom, Christine, I can only tell you what I have in front of me.
Mhm.
Actually,
And-
Rich, I also pulled up what we went over last year.
Right, there it is right there, which is basically, the summary of what we provided them. And, this additional $800,000 ask is the delta for what they believe they need to get this done. Now, the comptroller's office is managing this contract. I have nothing to do with it. So
Mhm.
what you see is what I see.
Yeah, I'll just echo from a departmental perspective. It would be really helpful to get a clear understanding of the scope of the anticipated telecoms improvements, so we also know what to expect. And if funds have not yet been spent of the original 2.7 million appropriated last year, it may make sense to hold off on appropriating additional funds this year until that original appropriation is at least largely spent down. Also, do we have a status on the expenditure of that $1.7 million in ARPA funds committed towards this project? Because obviously there's a time constraint on the expenditure of those funds.
Rich, do you want me to? So I am just going to diplomatically say that most of the funds that they've been appropriated are already being obligated and or spent. And this is well down the road from maybe where we would have tried, which we did on a number of occasions, to look at this from a different lens. Unfortunately, Judy's not on today because she could give us more information. She's actually the person handling the project, but I think it's well down the road, Noel, on what they're doing and what's been spent, because they've only requested what they still haven't been able to have on this. This is a lot less than previous years. Did you freeze, Noel, or are you stunned?
Oh, no, I think it would be great to get a concrete report on what is remaining in the account for both the ARPA funds and the $2.7 million original appropriation. I understand that we are down the road, but nonetheless, if now the timeline for the project is delayed by a year, similarly, the appropriations should kind of follow suit. And so we did appropriate $2.7 million towards this project last year. I do believe that there are still funds available. And so it would just be good to have that concrete readout of how much funding is available.
I think that Paul and or Rich can ask, maybe Paul would be the best one to ask for. I think what Paul is showing you on the screen is what he's gotten back when he's asked before.
Yeah,
And that they are way down the road on having utilized every cent that's been received. And they should have been through your offices already to talk to you about probably not yours, Christina, because they just got to us, but I think they were doing 1520 first. But we can clearly get some more information from them.
Yeah, and the request is consistent with the presentation we had last year on that project. Again, I'm not familiar with all the details, but the amount that we received as a request was what they had stated they were intending to receive when we met last year talking about the capital budget. So, to the extent, and more often than not, we always see requesting over and above what we've budgeted. So I haven't seen that, and hopefully we won't. But I would not want to defer funding if it gets to a point in time in the fiscal year where we're going to need the funding to complete the project. And again, that's been managed by the comptroller's office, but I would not want to shortchange any project at this point.
Would it be possible before we reach a final decision, just again, get that readout of how much is available?
Well,
In what way are you asking how much is available? How much more they need? How much they haven't spent? What exactly are you looking for? Because this is what we have.
How much they haven't spent. So of the ARPA funds and the capital funds that have been committed to date to this project, how much has been spent to date? Because it looks like here the city has committed 2.5 million in ARPA funds and $2.7 million in capital. Certainly last year they had spent 720 or spent/committed, excuse me, $725,000. But it'd be really good to know how much is actually spent.
we can,
Of the
well, here's the thing, we can dig that up, and I'm sure we could, or Judy could provide it. But my issue might be, are you suggesting that you don't want to approve the 800,000 in this until you have that number? Because we're going to have to approve something this week, and so that's where we're at. So
If the city has committed $5.2 million towards this project to date, which we have, and if $1 million or $2 million has been spent, and we don't anticipate spending the remainder of it in the coming fiscal year, then it doesn't necessarily make sense to appropriate $800,000 in additional funds to it.
Well, if you want to kick the can down the road, I mean, you can do that, but that's up to you. We could ask Judy to come up with an additional explanation of how much is left. But I'm just going to tell you that we do need to have a capital budget this week. So if that's what you're suggesting, we could do that. But then we'd have to schedule another meeting this week.
Oh, can I say something? When you look at this numbers, the total that they needed was $5.2 million. And they got the ARPA funds. Didn't we give them less in fiscal year capital requests in fiscal year 25? Did we give them the 2.7 or did we give them less than that?
It was the full 2.7. And that's why the simple question is how much of that has been spent and how much of the ARPA funds have been spent.
We could pose that to Judy.
She's actually out for a period of time. We should be able to get it from somebody in their office.
Oh,
Okay. So we can ask. I mean,
sure.
I actually don't think there's much left. That's the real issue was when it was the 5.2 and we tried to make changes back a couple of years ago on this. So anyway, but we can get those.
I see Alderwoman Schweitzer has her hand raised.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation, Mr. Bradley, and for all the information. This is really helpful. I had a few questions. One is for the miscellaneous city vehicles. One of the things I mentioned in the first meeting that we had was wanting to make sure we had a street sweeper that would work in the bike lanes. Is that something that's already been funded somewhere else, or is that one of the miscellaneous city vehicles?
Chris, you want to handle that one?
Absolutely. Because we ended up using some ARPA money at the end, like in November, December, we had enough to fund the sweeper for bicycles out of the FY25 money that you allocated last year. So those specs are all down to BPS. Today was the first day they could put them in for the new one. So they're going to get a heavy pickup truck, a tilt trailer bed so they can transport it safely, and a small sweeper so it will fit on trail size that would be like along the river or out in a park. The big ones could do the bike lanes that are on a street, but the special one is going out for bid should be out for bid well before the end of this month, and we'll know for sure what's going to cost. But in general, it's about $260,000 for everything on that one. And Bethany has already approved it, which is why it's down for that bid. And Kyle, who's the gentleman who's in charge of that program, approved it. And Kent Flake and I agreed that we're a little suspicious about the reliability of these small sweepers. We just don't have any experience with them. So Bethany had told Kent to consider buying a second sweeper out of street department funds. And Kent is leaning towards making a skid steer loader like a Bobcat with a broom type on the front of it, so we'd have a backup. And that way, if we do have maintenance problems with the more complicated one that we don't have experience with, we'd have a second one that we could use, and that's always a good idea.
Definitely. I agree that having a backup's a great idea. Thank you I appreciate everyone's thoughtfulness on that. We're sure though that the size that is being ordered will fit on the city bike lanes, even the protected ones.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Kyle validated that. We gave them the specs on it, and they went out and surveyed the trails.
Right, because I'm thinking of the one on Jefferson, for example, which I ride regularly and gets full of glass, and it's just not very wide. And I don't even, I'm sure Mr. Bradley, you might know offhand the number of feet it is, but maybe 8 at most.
That's about right.
Oh, it's much smaller than that.
Okay, this is gonna be a tiny little thing. I'm excited about it.
Well, it's not tiny, but it's about the size of a golf cart, except taller.
Interesting. Well, I look forward to seeing it and seeing that. I know people will be really excited to hear the city has one of those coming, or 2 of those, or 2 options. One of the things that happened, and I think we got some not awesome press for last year, was city vehicles that were purchased that were Mustangs and kind of looked at as luxury vehicles. So I just wanted to ask, the plan for making sure that the city vehicles that are ordered wouldn't fall into, a luxury vehicle or, category that would be upsetting to the public.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it was just unfortunate that Ford decided to resurrect the Mustang name tag for that, because they have nothing in common with the muscle car from my day.
I
So
know.
they were little, they're little cars. You've seen them, and the use of those vehicles was low bid.
Sure.
So they were a little bit longer than the Chevy Bolt, which we bought the first 2 years, but they didn't have, GM stopped making them because of problems they were having with the battery. So we don't have any plans on buying small vehicles at this point. In fact, we're still anxious to see whether or not Ford and GM are going to continue to make the full-size pickups and the full-size vans. But those types of trade vehicles are the ones that we really need to replace. And there are many of them that are electric vehicle appropriate based on the number of miles they drive and all that. And I'm happy to tell you that all the commissioners and directors at this point who are in those departments where the electric vehicles will work have been receptive to the idea of putting them in. So we're using the money that the committee approved for us for the infrastructure. We've got 8 projects that are already bid and committed, just waiting for installation when parts get here. And then we'll have the recharging infrastructure, and the vehicles will be back in match. And you'll probably notice I didn't ask for any electric vehicles this year. And I did that because I wasn't sure, based on the federal election, what was going to happen with that, with the manufacturer. So I didn't want to put down a slightly higher cost of vehicle. But even some of those things that are on this list, which I hope you'll be able to approve, if they turn out to be a full-size pickup truck, and we get a tax rebate on that, even as a government agency. So basically, we could buy an electric one for about $2,000-3,000 a piece more, which would end up saving money based on the fuel and maintenance for the life of the vehicle. So we could still make the switch to go to more electric vehicles if they continue to make them, and if the rebates continue at the federal level.
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, I appreciate that the Mustangs are nothing like the ones that they were. It's just a kind of perception is reality thing when you look at a news story like that, that I think we all try to avoid. I had a question about the, miscellaneous building repairs section. One of the things, I was at a community meeting last night, and one of my constituents works at the CJC and mentioned mold issues in the building. And I know that there had been requests for plumbing and HVAC repairs, but I was wondering if something, like a mold issue is being considered as part of the miscellaneous building repairs in the CJC.
So this is the first time hearing of that. The CJC is under the Department of Public Safety, and I have not heard anything about mold issues. If it is brought to our attention, we will work with the CJC to get that resolved, and it could certainly fall underneath of that. It could also fall under a budget item, which we have professional services in there for mold remediation and testing, which we do have items like this that pop up. But generally, that miscellaneous building repairs, like I said, is roofs, tuck pointing, water line breaks, things like that. It is not, and I'm going to highlight this, it is not carpet or any kind of furnishings or things like that. It is things that break that we need to fix, HVAC, electrical, mechanical, and so forth. And we have these items break a lot, and we can no longer get parts for them. So that's what we use them for. While you're mentioning the CJC, I do want to talk, because I think Christine actually asked a question and I didn't get a chance to answer it. So I want to go back to that for just a second.
Sure.
There were only 2 critical items that were on the list for the CJC. And those are, one of them was a rooftop air conditioning unit, which I spoke to my staff about, and my staff feels like that the unit is still within its useful life. And also, as I had previously mentioned, the Capital Committee, we have beyond the over plus $20 million we spent at the Just Center. We also are in the middle of a jail grant project where we were doing plumbing and HVAC and a number of different things over there. And you can see that on your capital needs list. It's highlighted. And so the other thing is, if there's additional funding left over from that jail grant project, that would probably be the high priority that I would go to, is replacing, that HVAC unit. The other item that was on there was an upgrade technology to digital camera system. And the issue with that, and when I said I need to speak with the new commissioner, and I really don't have a solid answer on this, we did a lot of upgrading technology to digital when we did all the lock work and the $20 million over there. So I'm not 100% sure we need to do additional work over there. That $250,000, if it would, come up and we do need to do things there. A lot of times the Just Center has, corrections has additional funding left over from personnel balance or other items in their budget. That is not a tremendously large item that we could figure out a way to fund that if additional work is needed there. So that kind of talks about the Just Center. And then Christine, you had mentioned the medical examiner, and the medical examiner, the only item that I have on my list that I see is a carpet replacement under needed. So is there something particular you were talking about?
I thought we had talked about last time, and the Citizen Advisory Committee had ranked it very highly. There was the lights in the surgical room, and there was something else. And I felt like I was like, I didn't have time to check. Yeah, that's what I thought too. It's like, was it just a artifact? Like, we've already funded it. It sounded familiar.
Right. If I'm not mistaken, the surgery room lighting was funded. We worked through that. And this past year 25, we also did replacement of air purification units for
Right. Okay. So
$100,000.
for some reason, that was on the list that Paul sent out. And
so that's not on the capital needs list. But the other item we did was the 2 refrigeration units and evaporation and for 90,000. So I believe that the medical
They're all met.
examiner we are good with.
Okay.
And I can confirm that because I actually talked to Tara Rick, who runs operations before we started these meetings to see if she had any other needs with capital than before. And she was appreciative that the rest of the city actually asked her what she needed and that she had gotten the money through the ARPA and through other monies that were available. So I think she's good for
Okay.
for 25 fiscal year 26.
I agree that we've done a lot of this work, but my question is, why is this showing up as one of the top 10 priorities through the Citizens Advisory Committee process? Because what I would have guessed is that the Citizens Advisory Committee heard from the medical examiner's office, and that's why they ranked these items so highly, because we've got the air purification unit is the #1 priority from the Citizens Advisory Committee, and then surgical room lighting and the refrigerating units are also in that top 10. So I'm just curious what's going on. Paul, do you have any idea, or Rich?
So they're all being done. I mean, they're in process now. So, I would look at it like this, that it's great that it's a high priority because we're doing it and, we're ahead of the 8 ball this time. We're getting it done. So I don't know why they, if that just got carried over in the survey or whatever, but they're all in process now.
And I also think, as we discussed last week, when you are able to visualize what it is that you're funding specifically, such as that, and it happens to be a smaller ticket item, that adds to its, when you're talking millions of dollars in the other projects, that adds to its feasibility in terms of funding.
Yeah, but I guess
If I could,
questions why they showed up on their survey if they were.
No, I think those are some of the reasons.
You
I
don't,
just wanted to add that the vehicle-wise, the medical examiner's office in 24 had requested a second vehicle so that they could put 2 crews out at the same time. And we did procure that additional vehicle. So small potatoes compared to building stuff, but the capabilities they needed fleet-wise, we did take care of.
I do have a quick update on the telecom project for at least the ARPA piece. The ARPA piece has been accounted for. It was originally $2.5 million. Let's see here. I pulled up something here.
we cut it, didn't we?
What's that?
And we cut it, the amount they were getting.
No, I mean, this is the original part of the question was about how much of the ARPA piece was being spent. Let me pull up here. I thought I had. Project. Yeah, the 2.5 million, this is back in February. 2.35 had been spent and the other 148 had been encumbered or committed. So that the 2.5 of the ARPA has already been obligated. Okay. The other thing I'd like to bring up, let me see if I can share again. Screens. Are the exhibits themselves. These are, so once you take all of what we have discussed and put them into the budget, the capital budget itself, you should have also all received that this last week, the exhibits themselves. So when we talk about what the fuel tax is funding, those are the projects that Rich described. Those would be in the citywide capital account, and all the excess, the half surplus monies, those are incorporated within those within the 2 exhibits on the citywide accounts. And then, of course, all the other exhibits follow from that. All right. So it seems like, oh, go ahead, Noel.
Yeah, I've got
I had a few more questions too.
Okay,
I
go
was
ahead.
kind of left turned when we went back to Christina's questions.
Okay.
You go ahead, Alderwoman.
Thank you so much. Let me pull up my question list. Rich, you probably said this, but the river to pair improvement that's listed, is that the match funds for the $18 million federal grant, or does that get us part of the way to the match funds? I get a lot of questions in my community for, where we are on that project. You're muted. Rich, you're muted. Happens to the best of us.
Sorry about that. It is, so far in River to Pair, the project was $19,700,000. We have a grant for the entire project. So the federal match share is $15,760,000. The match share we need is $3,940,000. I have funded the design of $480,000 out of miscellaneous roadway money that I talked about above for repairs and other things where there was no funding. And then, so this year we needed $20,000 for the right of way to be established, but in FY27 we would need $3,440,000 for the construction. This is one of those that we made up the balance of this $5.3 million. Paul and I said, well, we'll just put the remaining balance of that money into the River to Pair project because we're eventually going to need another $3.4 million for that. But yes, the grant is in place. We are in design. The next step is the right of way, and then construction would be needed in FY27. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm trying to take notes while you were talking, but
I can send it to
I
you.
think Paul might have it pulled up too. I can't quite see it
Yeah,
completely,
let me.
but yeah,
I can send you an email and break it
that would
down.
be great. I'm better in writing than I am
Sure,
in listening,
that's
to be
easy.
honest with you.
No problem.
Thank you. And then one of the things that, we, great city work today to get the new tree trimmer that can take down those sort of hard to reach trees. It's got a fun Swedish name like Shebogen or something. And it was just in my neighborhood today cutting down trees. And I know that was a LUSTAT request for something that was, this is like a missing link in what city what issues are city services. One of the things that keeps happening is we have potholes that if they're too small to get filled by the traditional pothole filling that the city does, they pop out and then we have that pothole remain. Is that something where we have the wrong, I mean, that's probably maybe not a capital request, but is that something where there's some capital item we're missing that is not allowing us to fill those smaller potholes, I guess is one of the questions. And then if there were any other sort of LUSTAT requests that have come up that come from the team working on that would be able to say, this is a capital request that we've missed. And that's kind of a general question.
So I'll start off with that and tell you that, generally what happens is an operating department like streets or parks or public utilities or whatever, who know their mission every day would typically come and start having discussions with myself or Chris or Nancy on, hey, we need this in order to do this better. I'm not aware of anything else at this time that has come up like the tree trimming vehicle, which, was way different than anything we had ever purchased before. I will, ask Nancy and Chris if they're aware of anything, but no one has operationally said to me, I need, whatchamacallit to fix potholes, and we don't have it.
Besides like the street sweeper for bike lanes, which is already in the progress. Right.
But Nancy or Chris?
The only other item that was purchased was the small street sweeper and then the backup that they're gonna do now in case. But the difference between, at LUSTAT, the way that big vehicle came up with the tree trimming is that we don't have enough, Paul, calm down, stay calm, because we don't have enough tree trimmers. And so we believe that this will save us 5 or 6 people initially. I'm gonna say initially, Paul, but because we can't hire them if we buy this piece of equipment. That's true to a degree, but we actually have to have 2 people that manage it to make sure it works right and Chris can go into the loading and everything else. So it didn't save us as many people as we sold ourselves to Paul over, but we still think it was a good use of funds and buying it, but it doesn't take it's not like that took 5 to 10 people vacancies that we wouldn't have to fill. We still have to fill some of them, but it's a huge help. But those are the only two things that we really needed. I think also, Chris, we bought some snow blades for smaller trucks for next year. I'll get the numbers wrong, either F-150s or 250s or something that can have a smaller blade on them, but they can be used around the rest of the year. So I think those are the only things that they're really not that uncommon, but that's what we purchased.
That's perfect, Director Cross, because the snow removal piece was my next question for, you know, anything that we learned from this snowstorm that we needed to do. You know, I will say in having watched the tree trimmer work today, they got 2 pretty large trees done right around me in like 20 minutes. So it might not save, you know, overall number of people, but if we're getting a ton more work done in a shorter amount of time, that makes each individual person that much more effective, which may mean that hiring needs to go down in terms of how many people are needed.
Not the one you have to sell this on. It's the guy.
Yeah, I just, for anyone watching, you know, we're making government more efficient. That's what we're doing here.
I appreciate you helping me with my cause, but because you've actually seen it in action. I wouldn't know it if I fell over it. So I appreciate that. So yes, but
it is a crazy looking machine. I'll tell you what.
So
I think those were all my questions. Thank you for letting me take so much time, everybody.
Well, and just one more point on that. I would also say when operating departments ask for something, we do a really good job. Chris and his staff, Rick and his staff do a really good job vetting things out with the commissioners and directors to make sure that we're not only, you know, buying something that works and saves money somewhere, but that it doesn't create a maintenance nightmare for the staffs to have to keep it running. So there's a lot of investigation, a lot of discussion, and a lot of back and forth to make sure that we get something that works for everybody and doesn't create more costs on one side than another too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Alderwoman.
If I may
All
ask
right.
a couple questions as well.
Sure.
And thank you everyone for all your work. And as usual, there's so much essential work that is being budgeted here. So thank you. A comment and then a few questions. The comment is in kind of responding or jumping off of Christina's comment about some longer term planning, is that I know that formally the way this is budgeted is as a 5-year plan. And I believe that that's also what's provided for in the kind of enabling ordinance for the capital committee is to think in terms of 5-year planning. And so I do think that something that sometimes causes both opportunity, but also sometimes confusion, is that sometimes we budget a capital need and we budget the entire capital need for what it will take to complete this project. And sometimes, in most cases, we budget kind of incrementally what the capital need will be for this year, and then we add more money to it the following year and the following year and the following year. And so I do think that it would be helpful to help. I know Paul and Rich, that's how you think of this is in those kind of full project timelines, full project budget scope, and in the longer term 5-year terms. But to help us as a committee think that way, I do think that it might be helpful to set aside some time towards the beginning of the capital planning process to lay out the full resources that we anticipate having available over the 5 years and kind of the full budgets of some of these projects. So that's just a comment. And again, I know that you all, Rich and Paul, are thinking in this way, and just to help the rest of us follow along as well. Then a few questions, starting, I guess, on telecom. It's great to hear that the ARPA funds are spent down nearly in full. Of course, those were appropriated in 2021, so that's great to hear. It would be really good to know what the FY25 $2.7 million, what the status of those are still. With respect to courts, a question, Rich, in practical terms, who's doing this work of contracting? Is it BPS?
A little bit of both. And so here's what I say about that. So the courts, if they're, depending on what the project is, they may do the contracting, but what you have to remember is just like anybody else, I have to approve the scope and the contract because it's capital funding. So let's say, for example, the courtroom modernization, Amanda Sadomka and her staff is going out for RFPs. I will review those and I will personally have to sign off on those before they proceed. Anything capital, radios for the police, anything, I have to sign off. Okay? If it is something that, you know, we can add on and help them with an open-ended contract with through facilities, we try to do that. Unfortunately, what I'm going to tell you is this, just like everybody else, we have only so many people here to do a lot of work. And so it becomes to the point where, I think I've said this before, you know, most of my engineers here are doing 3 and 4 times the workload of a normal engineer that is in, you know, hired for a private firm. So it gets to the point where it's overwhelming to people. I can't keep engineers now. I can't pay them enough. And all that does is drive them away. So we try to do a very equal balance. We try to partner on other things, for example, like elevator modernization, where the courts will have no idea how to do that. Facilities will be in charge of helping them get through that.
So your answer, and thank you for that, Rich, leads directly into my next question, which is, I see a long list of projects for the courts here that look like they will take significant capacity. And my question is, do you actually anticipate all of these projects moving forward next year? Or would it make sense? Is this one of the cases, that is to say, where we're budgeting everything that they asked for, but they're actually going to spend it over the course of a couple of years?
So you have to be a little bit careful with the courts, and Paul, you can jump in and you can explain that better than I can, but the courts, Paul, you want to take
Yeah,
that?
they're
I'm
asked,
aware of it as well. The courts, we are legally obligated to fund
That's right.
courts budget
Yeah.
requests within reason. not
and their ask was,
budget requests.
their ask was 14 million. And
That's
so, what Rich has been trying to do with this list to address those critical items that we know we're gonna have to address. And then we know that there's some that are coming up. For instance, that facade project is gonna be a multi-year deal and it's gonna be pretty expensive. And it's a public safety thing where you've got to make sure the facade's secure. But what we're trying to do is trying to address those critical items that would hopefully get us moving in that direction with what the courts is asking for, so that we don't run afoul of them, and as well as address the safety things that we need to do to get done as soon as we can get it.
And you have to remember, Noel, that some of these projects require significant design work, that is the phase 1. So we have to go through the design work and so forth. And in these, I do not feel comfortable breaking them out like we're doing with the federal grant projects, which is a much more defined timeline. These projects, we need to allocate the funding for them. We'll go through the design process. When it is done and the design process is all over the board for timing, we will initiate RFPs for construction, or they will. So, you know, we're trying to get things done that they need. We're trying to appease what Paul said with the courts. Out of a $14 million ask, we're asking for 4.4 million. And, you know, in the same token, trying to manage these within the resources that we have. So.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act. And I guess my question is, with this set of projects that you're putting forward here, this long list of projects, do you think these funds will all be spent in the coming fiscal year, or will they be spent over the coming couple of fiscal years?
Some yes, some no. It just depends on the project and how things go. And then again, like anything, when we get into design, there could be unforeseen conditions that come up. The original facade repair project was $1 million that we funded. And when we did the design work for it, we found all kind of issues that had to be resolved for millions of dollars. So we phased that one for all those reasons. Would I like to have all the money now? Absolutely. Do I need all the money now? Absolutely. Can we afford it? We cannot. So we're forced into it, but the delicate balance is, when I look at this is do I and my staff feel comfortable breaking this into pieces? Because if you start one of these and heaven forbid, we're not here in a year and someone else is here and they don't find that as a priority, you have no longer solved the problem. You've created one.
Yeah. Heard loud and clear, and it sounds like this is an area where there's a little bit of flexibility given all these competing equities in terms of our budget constraint, their needs, timing. But this is certainly the recommendation. One more question on the courts, and then I'll move on. And that is that one priority, and I don't know if this has already been done or not, that emerged from the Citizens Advisory Committee was for new water service at the Civil Courts building. I'm curious why that's not on this list, or if that's already been completed.
So when you sit in my seat and I have to try to balance all these needs out across the board, if I'm not mistaken, without looking at the list, the new water service is a $900,000 ask. Okay, that's $1 million out of this 21.197 million dollars. Today, the water lines work. They are working. It's a preventative measure. So the you know, I look at this and try to weigh this out a little bit. Okay, so the building, the courtroom modernization, which the things don't work in the courtroom and they're using those every day. Do I do that? Do I do the water line? The water lines work. It's just engineering judgment to go through and try to see, again, should it be on this list? Absolutely. But there's
There's a lot of things that
you
should
gotta
be on.
make decisions. It's just part of it.
Exactly. All right. Thank you very much, Rich.
Sure.
I think in general, the way that we can, because what we're not allowed to do by law is kind of discriminate against the courts and not provide them with their needs, right? But they're also not, it's supposed to be within reason, and it's supposed to be equitably balanced with the city's needs as well. And so that's where coming back to the 5-year planning process and potentially getting some more robust public engagement could be a good way to justify and prioritize the court's needs and weigh them against our own. A couple questions about vehicles, if I may, Chris. One is that last year, I think we had discussed, and I think you wound up sharing a kind of prioritization list, because here we're talking about appropriating $4.5 million for city vehicles when, as we know, the critical needs, I think looking at the capital needs inventory, the critical replacement cost total is in excess of $30 million, if I'm not
That's
mistaken.
correct.
And so I think it
Yeah,
would
the
be
13 million that I asked or recommended was just 30% of the critical need.
right.
And I knew you weren't going to be able to fund that out of $21 million. But I thought it was my responsibility to make sure you understood what the need was so you could balance it with everything else.
Absolutely. And what I think would be helpful, at least to me, and I think we did this last year, is to get even out of that $13 million request, what the priority is, so that wherever we wind up funding this amount, we can see here's all the vehicles that get done, right, at each funding level. Does that make sense? Do you recall doing that
Yeah.
last?
Well, that list is each one
We
of
already
those
have that,
lists.
don't we?
Gave that,
That is what they are. They're priority lists.
Yeah, they're on what Chris provided earlier.
So I'm looking at what Chris provided. We're talking about the city fleet inventory by division.
For the other, which is what was group,
Wasn't on the critical
group
needs.
H.
Look at sheet H1, Noel. Other city
Oh,
vehicles, it
thank
starts
you.
at the
That's-
top and goes from 1 to 100 and
Okay, that's what I needed. I knew we had talked about it last year.
Okay.
It had to be somewhere, but I was looking at the city fleet inventory, not the
That's
Cap.
right. And
Okay.
that was the discussion last year too, was that the inventory that shows everything, so you can see kind of what the overall problem is and how different departments compare to each other with their needs. That one was not prioritized. That's what you're thinking of probably.
yes.
But the replacement list is prioritized. This was prioritized by hand by me after talking to all the directors and commissioners and my managers that have to maintain them. And so if you end up approving $4.5 million, we'll draw a line at $4.5 million. We'll start bidding from the top of the list down, the first 4 million. And then when we see if the budget amounts are right or not, then we'll add more to it 6 or 8 months into the process, so that we end up with the priority there. So the only reason that this list will change is if, because by the time we get the money in late July, some of these vehicles might be gone, or some of them might have been replaced by other funding. And so if that happens, then we just skip over that one and go to the next one on the list.
Perfect. And will we draw the line at 4.5 million, or are there a couple of the refuse vehicle needs that are in that 4.5 million?
No, I made the refuse list separate,
Okay.
and I did that because it's kind of a whole nother problem. It has the 1.8 million that's from the special funding source. And then with what the recommendation is at this point about what we add to it, instead of just replacing 4 trucks, we will be able to replace 9 trucks. And replacing 9 trucks with some of them cart, some of them alley trucks, and probably a rear loader or 2 for a bulk pickup. So the mix of trucks is something that, I'll work with Randy on with refuse, and Bethany has final say. The street director always does, about what the mix is that we recommend. And so that list is a separate number because it has that separate funding source. But we are kind of mixing it. Part of this could be on the other list if we wanted to. When we did ARPA, it was all on one big list.
No, that's perfect. I'm glad you've separated it out, seeing as the appropriations are separate. And looking at the refuse, it's interesting that a lot of these seem needed, but obviously we know from our experience that it's a critical need for the city overall. Can you share why you classified some of these refuse needs as needed as opposed to as critical?
Well, if the vehicle is due this year, it's 8 years primary service is due to be replaced this year, then it's going to be indesirable. If it's 2 to 3 years overdue, meaning it's about 10 years, 11 years, it'll be in the needed column. And if it's in the 5-year overdue where we really can't keep it running much longer, it's going to be in the critical list. So we have been able to, because of the help of this committee and because of the help we got during the ARPA part, we got closer to where we should have been all along. But because the vehicles kept getting more and more expensive every year, 5 years ago, a refuse truck cost $240,000. Right now, they cost $325,000 in just that period of time. So what I did here was I look at the only side loader that needs to be replaced that's critical, and then I looked forward to what's going to have to be done next year and the year after that. And the problem is that when we got well before, we ended up buying 10, 15 trucks at the same time. And so what I did here was I split the needed between the ones I wanted to fund and the ones that could wait till next year. That way we don't have to come up with $10 million for refuse all in 1 year and then cause that big bubble to go forward like that. So by doing what's recommended on this list, we'll spend the 1.8 million of special funds, and we'll spend whatever additional funds this committee allocates for the refuse trucks. And it takes 18 months to get them anyway. So by the time they get here,
They'll be
probably
critical.
some of the needed ones will be red.
Yeah.
But at least this way, we won't end up with a huge bubble next year. Now we kind of split it between what we're doing this year and what we'll be able to do next year.
That all makes sense. Thank you, Chris.
You're
My
welcome.
last question concerns Rich ITSA and their needs. And I'm in full support of fully funding the ITSA needs, which are essential for the security and functionality of the city's fiber network, which is what is used to maintain, I mean, streetlights, but also security cameras, and now for the first time, free public Wi-Fi at several city parks. And my question was, I think in the inventory, it stated that the request for the Hyper 5 switches was 300,000, bringing the total request to 600,000. I was curious why here we put in 75,000.
I believe, let me pull their sheet up, Noel. I believe the total request was $300,000. And I believe it was $75,000 a year for 4 years, equaling 300,000.
Got
So,
it. This is one of those where we anticipate
right,
funding
that's
75,000
correct.
for 4 years. Understood. Thank you. And actually, I know that explains it. And then I know actually I said that this was my last question, but I will make one more comment, and that is kind of echoing the importance of transitioning some of the city's cameras from analog to digital. I don't know the exact status of CJC cameras. I do know that here at 1520, we also don't have digital cameras, and that that does present security concerns in terms of inability to effectively review footage and match footage to time. So I can only imagine what a challenge it may represent for CJC, and just would echo the need for that in general, not only at CJC, but also at 1520.
Noted. Thank you.
All right, Alderwoman Schweitzer, I see your hands up.
I apologize. I saw the Christie expenditure and I sent Rich a message, but I probably should just say it out loud. For some of the ones that are very specific to projects that were initiated with Ward Capital, like the Christie project, is that something that the alderman should be asked to fund through Ward Capital and then use that money that's not, that could be spent on additional vehicles or things that aren't necessarily appropriate Ward Capital expenses? I believe I already have 50,000 set aside for Christie. So it's almost half funded just with what I have sitting there for Ward Capital. And I'm sure Alderman Oldenburg, I'm not going to necessarily speak for him, but just in case I can speak for him, we could make up the amount needed to have that available money for other things.
So typically on a federal grant project like that, if it runs through wards, what John Kohler will do is he will reach out to you all and he will ask the question if you want to fund a portion of that through Ward Capital. The reason that that particular one is all in here is because it is a Complete Streets Committee request. And so the Complete Streets Committee by ordinance requests the Capital Committee. So what I would say is if you and Alderman O would like to do something different there, that's fine. But this is what the request is for the federal match.
Okay. Are we making the final vote today, or is this something where I can get our commitments in and then there's $120,000 available for other needs?
So one thing is, regardless, we would have to have you put something in writing ASAP from both of you, and you should know that Tom Oldenburg has helped fund the Ted Drews work, so I'm not sure how much capital he has left or would have going forward. So just to keep that in mind, because he did help fund that project to make that go faster. So
I understand. I just
your
want to
fault.
think creatively to get as much done as possible.
I'm not suggesting that it's not a creative thought, and what I'm suggesting is I'm just giving you a heads up that he may come back and say, I already paid for this. So I want you to have full information. He's paid for a lot of the Ted Drews work that was done, which allowed us to move quicker. But if he and you agree, I think Paul needs an answer like within 24 hours in order for us to be able to move this.
Yeah, we do need to, I mean, we don't have to have a vote today, and I know Noel asked about the telecom monies, but we do have to have a meeting and vote out this week. So we can reschedule if we have to later this week.
I know Rich has some later this week, he might not be available, just to say that we'd have to schedule it probably pretty quickly.
I'm available.
Oh, I didn't realize. I thought you
I
were
will
out.
make myself
Sorry, Rich.
available, whatever needs to be done.
I think it
feel-
was, I
Thank
think
you.
it was last week you were thinking, or that he was out.
Okay,
Well,
go ahead, Noel.
One last comment, that's even though there were only 11 responses to the survey, I still think that in general, it's good to prioritize items which have been scored highly by the public and deprioritize ones that were not prioritized by the public, just in order to be responsive and accountable. And I do want to flag that there's significant recreation center needs, $8.7 million total, which were once you take out the work that's already done at the medical examiner's building, the top two priorities from the public engagement. And also that conversely, other city vehicles, including building division, communications division, and facilities maintenance division vehicles, which is say non-fire police, non-refuse, scored very low, the third lowest. And so I think it's worth thinking about some possible exchange. Of course, I want to be clear that I recognize the operational imperative of funding our city fleet. I'm not saying do not fund our city fleet, but this is always about a balancing act, and I think that the public here is pushing us to balance in a way that prioritizes our recreation centers a little more highly.
Well, I would
Operations
sort of
manager.
want to acknowledge that if you look at the list, I felt we did that pretty well. I mean, if you look at pool, that's $500,000, $1.6 million for fencing, or a 6 for fencing, that's $1.1 million. HVAC upgrades, it's another $500,000, that makes it $1.6 million. Plus the electrical upgrades, that makes it $2.1 million or $2.2 million. So that's over 10% of the whole allocation. So I thought we were being sensitive to that, and I would, and that doesn't include the Sherman Park maintenance building, which is more of a maintenance issue, but it's a park related. So I thought we were being, and Rich's list came up pretty sensitive to that when we did it, and it's a matter of juggling a bunch of items, those things that are both responsive to the Citizens Advisory Committees, responsive to the Complete Streets Committee, as well as fixing those things which do not have a constituency. As Rich could tell you, pipes in the middle of a wall that break do not have a constituency, but it's something you got to do. And so somehow we got to balance all of this out. And I'm very sensitive to that too, because I participate in the Citizens Advisory Committee that whole month, and the comments are very good, and the maybe a small group, but I thought the participation was good and attentive, and I think we were being attentive to that when this list was recommended.
So, and I just want to add from an operational standpoint, some of the things that are under parks were things that the previous advisory committee asked for, and we had not funded for the last few years, and we're finally funding. And even though the Sherman Park maintenance may seem like a park versus recreation, it's right behind the recreation center at Wool. They're right next to each other. So the fact they're pretty close in proximity, but spending almost $4 million for a change on parks and things and recreation centers is important, and we've done more this time than we did in the previous year. And although we have a citizen advisory committee, I think the issue next year would be to make sure that we get more participation if we only had that so few surveys filled out this year, where we've had more in the past. And I think that's a way to look at trying to go over what's happening. And then the few people that were watching, I'm not even sure all of them filled out the forms. I think the group that came was good, but it's a very small group of people that are having input on how this is being done. And the purpose of it was set up one way, but the implementation and the interest from the citizens has not borne out the same way as I think many of us on this call were hoping for. So.
I definitely recognize that this is more than we've done in the past, and that commitment is noted and appreciated, and the responsiveness is really admirable. So I appreciate that, Paul and Rich and everyone who puts this together. I do think that it remains a top priority for the public because it's one of the chief ways that they interface, obviously, with these. The Sherman Park Maintenance Facility is essential. It's absolutely essential for parks employees, but it's not used by the public, right? Of course, the public relies on it because parks employees rely on it. So it is always a balancing act, and I'm just going to continue to encourage us to expand funding for those public facilities. But I do appreciate the expanded investment in this year's budget. And I also agree with you, Nancy, that expanding that participation is really essential in the coming years.
You know, I think what you get sometimes too is when you have a lay people committee, what Paul kind of alluded to this, you know, they tend to lean towards things that they see. They lean towards things the public would use. And I think, you know, it's very hard to take, and trust me, it's hard to take $20 million and apply it to $130 or $40 million in critical needs and say why one thing is much more important than other. Truth be told, that $130 million list, we should be funding all of that. Unfortunately, we don't know what's there. And I think Alderwoman Schweitzer made a great point in the chat that, and we don't know what's going to be there next year. So we try to be as diligent as we can to cover a lot of bases at one time. So your point's well taken. And you know, I said in all the citizen advisory committees, a number of the folks have run into me on the street or talked to me. And so, you know, I generally think they understand things they see as opposed to things that are more behind the scenes that make things happen.
Okay, thanks, Rich. All right, which brings us to next steps. So what's the prerogatives here? If do we want to have another meeting later this week? Is that?
Probably be pretty short.
What's that? I'm
I
sorry.
said I'd probably be pretty short if we have questions answered and
Yes, yeah.
we're able to do some things behind the scenes to get information. I already put in the
Right.
request for Oldenburg for the
Okay.
60-60 split.
Well, then let's do that. This would have to be a quick turnaround time. Today is what, late? Jeez, I don't know what day it is. Today is Tuesday, so in order to be up and running, how does everyone's Friday look?
Open.
Good to go.
Not the morning, not I have something at 10, so I could do like early or noon to 2.
Okay. Christina?
I'm good. Free.
Good? Great. Nancy?
I'll make it work, whichever time
Okay.
is best.
Well,
I'll make it work, earlier the better.
okay. We just can't do 10. That's my understanding. Okay. All right. Well, let's shoot for that. We'll try to get some materials, whatever we need outstanding information on that we can get that circulated, and hopefully we can get this voted out of committee on Friday. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Anything else for the benefit of the group?
It does. May I ask one more question, Paul? And that
Sure.
is if you have, oh, I froze up there, but I had one more question, Paul.
Sure.
And that's, can you hear me? We had any more information from the
Well, you're breaking
comptroller's
up.
office as to the potential timing of a general obligation?
Yes, we
Sorry.
actually inquired of the FA. We do expect that we will have that opportunity later this year. I'm told that it probably be somewhere in the $23-24 million range. But that depends on what interest rates do and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the group?
I guess if Schweitzer is successful with Oldenburg to make a commitment, having a plan for where that money would go, that's freed up.
And what was the delta on that again?
300,000,
Okay,
I believe. Hang on. It is
$120,000 in the.
120,000, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I already have 50 set aside in Ward Capital, so it's not, I think we can do it.
okay,
But I did email Tom already.
okay, very good. Anything else?
So, what you could do with that is you could put it towards one of the other categories that's here. That's a multi-year funded program. Or if somebody sees something on the list for 120,000 that I'll look through myself and see just if there's a recommendation there, but maybe take a look at the list or look and see where you might recommend putting it. But
One-
yeah, 120,000.
One pitch I'd offer that could be a good fit is Christina had started off talking about the need to invest in the CJC as well as the courts. I know you mentioned that some of the digitalization of the cameras may have already been completed, but perhaps there's additional work to be done. Again, I noted that certainly 1520 still needs to be digitalized, so perhaps the more general digitalization of the cameras, but that's just one idea that could apply to both CJC and other city facilities.
All right, well, thank you all. See you, we'll get something scheduled for Friday.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, all.